Imagine dragging a shredded, bleeding body through freezing mud, fighting for every single inch of ground, completely alone and miles from civilization. Or picture a warrior kneeling before his captors, willingly placing his arms on a wooden block to meet the swing of a heavy hatchet. In a functioning society, a legal system steps in to handle our grievances. A judge gavels, a sentence is handed down, and the rules are maintained. But what happens when you are entirely cut off from civilization? Or worse, what happens when the system itself is the entity that betrays you? To find out, we are going to examine 4 historical icons who were pushed past the absolute limit of human endurance. By looking at their darkest moments, we can see exactly how the human body, the intellect, and society itself can be weaponized to exact payback. When the standard rules of justice disappear, the only thing left to balance the scales is exactly what an individual is willing to endure to reach them. Take the case of American frontiersman Hugh Glass. In 1823, an encounter with a mother grizzly bear left him with deep gashes across his back, a broken leg, and a slashed throat. Assuming he would die any minute, his own expedition companions robbed him of his weapons and abandoned him in hostile territory. Refusing to succumb to his wounds, Glass set his own fractured leg and began a grueling 200-mile crawl across the wilderness. To stave off a lethal infection, he deliberately allowed maggots to hatch inside his wounds and eat the rotting flesh right off his back. Now, jump forward to 16th century South America. The Spanish Empire is locked in a vicious war with the native Mapuche people of Chile. The Spanish capture a prominent warrior named Galvarino, and to send a message to his tribe, they sentence him to have both hands severed at the wrist. Where Glass endured an agonizing crawl, Galvarino took a direct approach. Refusing to submit, he had heavy, sharpened knives tightly lashed directly to his bleeding, severed stumps. Mechanically securing these blades, he transformed his mutilation into an aggressive advantage, leading a furious head-on charge. The Mapuche forces were eventually overwhelmed by Spanish cannons and cavalry. Captured a second time and facing execution, Galvarino snapped at his captors that his only regret was dying before he could tear them to pieces with his teeth. Glass used his extreme physical trauma to fuel a slow, agonizing marathon of survival. Galvarino instantly converted his broken limbs into a literal weapon of war. Both men prove that when all external tools are stripped away, the human flesh itself can be repurposed to secure justice. While Glass spent months tracking down 2 specific men who wronged him, other figures face betrayals that threaten entire nations. In late 16th century Korea, Admiral Sun-shin was framed for treason by his corrupt, intensely jealous peers. His king stripped his military rank, threw him into prison, and subjected him to brutal torture. Rather than launching a personal vendetta against the king who broke him, Yi aimed his focus entirely outward. Reinstated out of sheer desperation when a massive Japanese invasion force arrived, Yi designed heavily armored, spiked vessels known as turtle ships to counter them. The scale of the threat was overwhelming. Yi found himself commanding a decimated, demoralized fleet of barely 13 surviving ships. Bearing down on him was a massive Japanese armada of 333 vessels. Using his knowledge of local tides, Yi forced the massive fleet into tight choke points, systematically sinking 31 enemy ships without losing a single vessel. During his final engagement at the Battle of Myeongnyang, a musket ball struck Yi in the chest. Knowing his men would break if they saw him fall, he ordered his nephew to put on his armor and continue beating the war drum, concealing his death until the invaders were permanently driven back. By setting aside his personal torture to protect the throne that betrayed him, Yi secured a victory that defied every mathematical probability. He prioritized the survival of his people over his own grievances, achieving a form of retribution through absolute strategic excellence. But how is justice served when the hero is murdered before they ever get a chance to fight back? In 12th century China, a brilliant and fiercely loyal patriot named General Yu Fei faced exactly this scenario. After years of defending the Song dynasty from northern invaders, Yu Fei's success threatened the political standing of a corrupt government advisor named Qin Hui. To protect his own wealth and status, Qin Hui had the general falsely imprisoned, subjected to months of horrific torture, and ultimately poisoned. With Yu Fei dead, it fell to the public to balance the scales. Decades later, the truth of the betrayal emerged. Society engineered a physical monument to his disgrace, casting iron statues of Qin Hui and his wife, bound and kneeling before Yu Fei's tomb. For the next 900 years, these statues served as a target for a nation's fury. Citizens traveled from across China to stand before the tomb and spat or urinate on the unearned figures of the man who betrayed their hero. Modern legal frameworks prioritize finite prison sentences and emotional closure. But this 900-year-old tradition reveals a harsher truth. When formal systems utterly fail a hero, a society will engineer eternal, visceral shame to fulfill the primal human demand for retribution. Which brings us back to the freezing American frontier and Hugh Glass. After crawling 200 miles and surviving the impossible, he finally managed to track down the primary mastermind who abandoned him to die. But there was a catch. His betrayer had since enlisted in the United States Army. He was now government property. If Glass pulled the trigger, military law dictated he would be immediately executed for murdering a soldier. Staring down the barrel at the man who ruined him, Glass made a calculated choice. He reclaimed his stolen rifle, accepted a $300 payout from the army, and turned his back. He chose to walk away alive, refusing to throw his hard-won life away just for the sake of blood. It is a choice that mirrors the other extremes we've explored. Whether it's Galvarino charging to his death on the battlefield, Admiral Yi carrying out his intellectual duty to his nation, or a society maintaining a generational grudge against a corrupt official. Whether securing justice requires lashing blades to your wrists or having the clarity to walk away, one fact remains. When pushed past the limits of human endurance, a person's absolute refusal to be destroyed is the ultimate act of revenge.